Happy Tomlin Tuesday, Steelers Nation. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and you are watching Steelers Talk. We just got a big update when it comes to the DK Metcalf situation here. Unfortunately, his suspension has been upheld. We're going to be talking about that at the top of today's show. Then we got some more injury updates from head coach Mike Tomlin himself here as we head into Browns week here in week 17 on guys like Nick Herbig, James Pierre, and more. Then there's a big opportunity that is now opened up for a young Steelers player. Make sure you guys stick around to the end of today's show to see who that player is. But before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that subscribe button for our daily Steelers coverage here on Steelers Talk. 2 Steelers videos breaking down the latest surrounding the black and gold every single day. Breaking news coverage every time there's a big injury update or this team makes a big move. We also go live. We try to go live at least twice a week during the week, and then we go live for Steelers games. Every single Steelers game we have live watch parties for, and it's all 100% free, guys. So help us out right now. Click that subscribe button. Help us get to 110,000 subscribers here on Steelers Talk. We greatly appreciate your guys' support. We can start with the big news of the day here. It just broke that DK Metcalf's 2-game suspension has been upheld by the National Football League. Metcalf had his appeal hearing today. He made an argument that, he was incited and that he had dealt with this fan before. But the NFL, as they usually do, upheld their suspension here, and Metcalf will miss the 2 full games to finish out the regular season. And the next time we see Metcalf would be in a potential playoff game at Acrisure Stadium if the Steelers lock up the AFC North division crown. Now, this suspension also costs DK Metcalf $45 million in guaranteed money. Now, it's not all the guaranteed money on his deal, but it is a lot of it in future seasons, of course. And, I don't think this is that big of a deal because DK, I don't think the Steelers are going to be cutting or trading him anytime soon. So I don't think, this is going to affect DK's bottom line or anything like that. He's still going to be probably making that money, barring some big injury or something like that, or if this kind of behavior continues and the Steelers decide to let him go. But I really don't think a player of his caliber is going to be getting cut anytime soon. So the guaranteed money issue, it's not that big of an issue, at least in my opinion, but it would be nice, obviously, to have that guaranteed money in your pocket if you were DK. But, I do think that the NFL is being inconsistent with their rulings here, all right? Because we've had examples, very recent examples, of players interacting with fans in a physical altercation in-game and not getting suspended for it. Now, obviously, I'm not condoning the behavior, and I do think a 1-game suspension absolutely would have been reasonable for DK Metcalf. If you're the NFL, you can't have players, physically, going up to fans and, shoving them or doing anything like that. But, if that's the standard, then why did Lamar Jackson not get a suspension for straight up shoving a fan in Buffalo? All right, the reasoning why was because he was defending one of his teammates, or that fan was apparently touching one of his teammates, and Lamar goes up to him and shoves him. But it's I don't see a huge difference there. I mean, Lamar Jackson with that shove definitely did more damage to that fan than what DK did to the fan in Detroit, yet he gets no suspension, and now DK Metcalf has to miss the next 2 games, which could put the Steelers' entire season in jeopardy now. And then Shaq Lawson, who played for the Buffalo Bills at the time, ended up shoving an Eagles fan last season, also didn't get a suspension. In fact, he didn't even get fined for that shove, all right? So there's a precedent here that was, maybe, that's not the precedent that the NFL wanted to set, but they set it. And now, not only is, DK getting a suspension when other players that have shoved fans in the past are not getting suspended, he's getting suspended for 2 games. And not only is it for 2 games, but it's the final 2 games of the year when the Steelers are in the middle of a playoff push here in a division race that is not over yet. Now, yes, the Steelers have an over 90% chance to win the division, no matter if you're looking at New York Times simulations or ESPN simulations or whatever simulations you want to look at. The Steelers still have a really good chance of winning the division without DK Metcalf, and Metcalf is likely going to be able to play again this year because the Steelers are likely to make the playoffs. But listen, man, at the end of the day, if Pittsburgh clinches this week, the suspension doesn't matter. And the second week of the suspension doesn't matter, obviously, right? Because, if you win the division this week, you're going to be resting starters anyway. So the Steelers probably want to play DK Metcalf regardless. So obviously, at this point, the Steelers just need to take care of their business. The only way that this suspension really hurts Metcalf and really hurts the Steelers is if some way, somehow, the Ravens can beat the Green Bay Packers and the Steelers lose to the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. But if the division is locked up by Sunday afternoon, which is a possibility, if the Ravens lose on Saturday night, the Steelers will be crowned division champs when the clock strikes 0 and before they even take another snap. But Tomlin said today at his press conference that he may sit some starters versus the Browns on Sunday if the division is already in hand. And, in terms of the discussion of which guys do you sit, which guys do you play, I think it's pretty obvious the 3 guys that you for sure sit down are Aaron Rodgers, Cam Hayward, and TJ Watt. Obviously, Cam and Aaron are older players that could really use a couple weeks to get right. Obviously, Rodgers is nursing a fractured wrist that he's still dealing with, giving him a couple more games to rest and, fully heal up in time for the playoffs would be huge. And then TJ Watt obviously is still recovering from that partially collapsed lung he suffered a couple weeks back in a dry needling session at the team's facility. So giving those 3 guys some more rest to get themselves ready for the postseason, I think would be prudent. But you could also think about guys like Alex Highsmith. Obviously, DK Metcalf doesn't have a choice. He has to sit these last 2 weeks. But then Jalen Ramsey, there are some injuries in the secondary, so I think it's going to be hard to sit Ramsey, but he's another one of those older players that could use a week or 2 to rest before the postseason. Kyle Duggar's another one of those guys. He's another 30-plus-year-old dude, and the safety depth is pretty decent, all right? You got, Chuck Clark and Jabril Peppers who can hold down the fort in the final 2 games if you want to preserve your starting safety duo. Zach Frazier is another guy. He's a younger guy with fresher legs, but if you lose him to injury, that's going to be pretty significant for the Steelers offense because, the guy that you would have replacing him is Ryan McCullum. I don't know how much I really trust him in a playoff setting. And then Troy Fautanu, who's been phenomenal. I think a Pro Bowl caliber season for him at right tackle. They trust him a lot one-on-one on that right side. If you lose him, that's going to be a significant injury as well. Don't want to lose him. And then you don't want to lose Darnell Washington, I would say. He's an X factor, man, both in terms of the run blocking that he provides, but also the run after ability he provides. There's nobody else on this team that can provide what he does from the tight end position. So, these are, the 10 guys that I would consider. I don't really expect Tomlin to sit all of these guys. I'm sure that he would play Frazier or Duggar or, some combination of these guys, but certainly DK Metcalf, unfortunately, will have to sit out these next 2 weeks. But the big question on my mind, if this scenario plays out this weekend and they do sit Aaron Rodgers, who starts at quarterback if Rodgers sits? Is it going to be the backup Mason Rudolph, or will they go with the rookie Will Howard to see what he's got? And personally, guys, I would be in the camp of wanting to start Will Howard because this might be the one and only chance we get to see Will Howard play in a couple of NFL football games here potentially. Where, he goes up against a legitimate defense, or maybe 2 of them, Cleveland and Baltimore, both have legitimate NFL defenses. It's late in the season, so we'd be able to test his ability to play outside and in the cold and do all those different things. Get to really get a barometer and a reading on how good Will Howard can be as an NFL quarterback, because this might be the only chance we have to really evaluate him before this team potentially might have to make a decision to give him a chance to start in future seasons. And then also, we don't want Mason Rudolph to get hurt either, guys. Like, if he gets hurt and then Aaron Rodgers gets hurt in the playoff game, then you're stuck with Will Howard, who hasn't played at all in the National Football League in a playoff game. Like, that is just not something that I even want to risk at this point. And, playing Will Howard will preserve Mason Rudolph's health as well if he's still the QB2 in that scenario. I think that's probably the best way to go about it moving forward. So pick your QB for me down there in the comment section. If it comes down to benching Aaron Rodgers to give him a couple weeks of rest before the postseason, division's already in hand, we're starting somebody else. Who are you starting? Type MR for Mason Rudolph. Type WH for Will Howard. My vote goes to Will Howard, but let me know your vote down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. And in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today. While I tell you about our sponsor, give me your answer to this pinned question down there in the comments. With that, let's have a word from our sponsor here. You guys can go to chatsports.com/AR8 to pick up an Aaron Rodgers Steelers jersey of your own. right now. Obviously, you guys can use code CHEERS here for 25% off to get this jersey a quarter off here right before Christmas. And listen, man, this is such a fun season for me and for us as Steelers fans. Aaron Rodgers, one of the all-time great quarterbacks, coming to Pittsburgh and, combining forces with Cam Hayward and DK Metcalf. This is going to be a season that we're going to remember for a very long time. And a Rodgers jersey, I think, is going to be something you can wear for a while. So go to chatsports.com/AR8 if you guys want to remember this awesome season, fun season with Aaron Rodgers as this team's starting quarterback with a jersey. Again, just go to chatsports.com/AR8 and use code CHEERS for 25% off this jersey today. Now, we got some of the latest injury updates from head coach Mike Tomlin today from the south side of Pittsburgh. Said he does not have much of an update on TJ Watt. He did say that he thinks he may practice this week, and he thinks he will speak to the media for the first time since he had that partially collapsed lung from a dry needling session in the Steelers building. So if and when he does talk to the media, that's going to be something to keep your eye on this week. Also, he said that he's optimistic that Nick Herbig is going to be able to play this week against the Cleveland Browns. He is nursing a hamstring injury, but I also think Herbig's one of those guys where if the division is locked up by Saturday night, then he might be another guy that gets sat down for another week to get another week of healing for that hamstring and get back to 100%. Brandon Echols, Mike Tomlin said, is hopeful to play this week as well. He dealt with an ankle injury, could not finish the game on Sunday versus Detroit, but he is hopeful to play this Sunday. James Pierre has been dealing with a calf issue these last 2 weeks. He's missed the last 2 games, is working out now, and is questionable to play Sunday, so we'll see how his status progresses throughout the week. And then Tomlin did not provide a status update on Calvin Austin III's hamstring injury that he suffered in the game against Detroit. He did not return to the game, so we'll keep you guys updated on Calvin's status as the week goes on. But I can't say that I have a ton of confidence at this point that he's going to be able to play against the Browns on Sunday. So that's going to provide a great opportunity to one Roman Wilson here, who hasn't been getting a helmet lately over the last 3 weeks. And it just so happens that the offense is kind of on fire these last 3 weeks since he's not been in the starting lineup. But Mike Tomlin did allude today that Roman Wilson will be the solution to replace DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin III in this Steelers passing attack. Especially, if DK is not going to be able to go this week, and it certainly looks like he will not be. Same thing goes for Calvin Austin III. But this is what Mike Tomlin had to say about the former third-round pick. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. A guy like Roman Wilson, for example, who has been working extremely hard and growing throughout the course of this thing, but had his role reduced in recent weeks. I'm excited for what this opportunity might mean for him to display growth in the midst of the time where he hadn't been participating, to show his professionalism and his readiness and how he's been sharpening his sword for battle in the ranks while he hadn't been playing. Now, obviously, Roman is probably going to get a helmet this weekend, but Scotty Miller is also going to get a helmet, and Scotty actually played pretty well in his limited role last week against the Detroit Lions. Had a couple really big, weighty down moments there, catching first down conversions on 3rd and 4th downs in that football game, and he showed some good route running ability. He showed an ability to toe tap down the sideline. Scotty Miller looked pretty good, so the question is, how does the depth chart and the rotation kind of look in terms of snap count in this wide receiver room heading into this week? And with DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin III probably out this week versus Cleveland, this is what the Steelers have to work with in terms of their available wide receivers. And, Ben Skoranek has been nursing, an upper body injury, and he hasn't really been able to be out there in a receiving capacity. He's been out there in special teams and in the tush-push situations, but he hasn't really been able to catch over the last several weeks. I don't know what his situation is with that, but right now you got Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you got Adam Thielen. Those guys are pretty much locked in as starters at this point, but then the question becomes, who becomes wide receiver 3? Would it be Scotty Miller or would it be Roman Wilson? And, Roman was playing above Scotty when Roman, was still getting his helmet, but Scotty Miller just showed up in a big way last week and showed some legitimate receiving chops. So it's going to be interesting to see what this rotation looks like heading into this week. We'll keep you updated on Calvin Austin III's status as the week goes on as well. But I am excited to see, if and when Roman Wilson can take this opportunity, by the horns and, show this coaching staff what he's capable of doing. Because I think, not everything, in terms of his lack of big plays and all this different stuff this season has been his fault. I mean, he's been open down the field quite a bit this year. Now, I think sometimes he, maybe doesn't run the route exactly the way Aaron Rodgers wants it to be run and the coaching staff wants it to be run, and sometimes maybe he's not exactly where he needs to be in the route at the timing of the progression, stuff that's, a little bit more due to the nuance and the detail of the position. But he's been open on go routes a number of times this year, and I think there might be some opportunities to throw him the ball down the field in this football game against Cleveland, a team that plays a lot of man coverage. So I'm excited to see what Roman can do with this opportunity, and hopefully he can prove to this coaching staff that he can be a contributor for this offense in future seasons. So pick your wide receiver 3 for me down there in the comments section. Type SM for Scotty Miller, or type RW if you would want to go with Roman Wilson as the number 3 receiver in the rotation this week. But that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors presented by Chat Sports here on Steelers Talk. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.